tonight. I'm Sue Fillion. I'm the planning director for the town. We just completed an exciting 3 days, last Thursday through Saturday, where we had a charrette. We have 2 members of the team here. We have Brandy Saxon from Place Sense and Paul Simon from Park Architecture. And they're going to kind of recap the findings of the charrette. I hope that you all had a chance to participate at some point during the charrette. We had a lot of good activities going on, that were going on, and we had the people that were there. There was a lot of good engagement. So exciting to have this wrap up tonight, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sue. I think most of you in this room came by at some point to engage in one of the activities that's been going on here in Brattleboro over the last 2 to 3 week period. So I think you've probably heard some portion of my spiel about what we've been engaged with around the downtown design plan. As Sue said, this is the final event of the multi-day charrette that we started last week. And this little image here is one of the products from that charrette, sort of wrapping a cartoon rendition of what people who came in to see us said that they love and think is great about downtown Brattleboro. So a lot of fun conversation and positive energy we did here during the time we were here. So just as a little bit of background to the downtown design plan, in case you have not seen one of my prior presentations, or you just love this slide so much that you want to see it repeatedly, the downtown design plan, looking at the public spaces in downtown Brattleboro, the Planning Commission is overseeing this project, has came up with a scope of work and goals for the project. And these are the basic ideas that we are working towards, trying to make downtown Brattleboro more inclusive, with public spaces that are accessible and welcoming to everyone, more walkable. In walkable, we're including bikeable. Just assume that walkable also equals bikeable. Creative, so that there would be more arts and cultural activities, enlivening and activating downtown spaces. Prosperous, we're recognizing the great connection between public space and quality, good public spaces, and a healthy downtown business climate. And green, which sort of covers a number of elements, from more green stuff, more landscaping, more plantings, thinking about green stormwater infrastructure, managing the environmental impacts downtown, thinking also about energy use and climate as well. So we've had a multi-step process through this project. We started off with the Better Block project which came to fruition a couple of weeks ago, with 3 temporary projects installed downtown: the bike lane, the story walk and arts project at the library, and the improvements to the alley between 167 and 181 Main Street. So that was the first thing, just try to get people thinking about what they would like to see downtown. We talked to a number of people around that weekend and started to collect information. We've also been, at the same time we've been doing all this, been running a survey that I'm sure many of you have taken on public space downtown, and that's continuing on and still getting a lot of feedback from people there. And then we held the charrette during the last week, where our larger team, so in addition to Paul, we've got 2 architects who are not here tonight, who were on the team: Ward Joyce out of Montpelier, who specializes in public spaces and creative placemaking type activity, and Chris Kennedy, who's based in Hanover, New Hampshire. Architect, also does a fair amount of downtown design and public space work and institutional projects. And Amy McCrellis, who is with Stone Environmental out of Montpelier as well, they do a lot of the green stormwater type of work. So this larger team, we all assembled and we spent essentially about 3 days solid here in Brattleboro, asking people what they would like to see, going out and walking top to bottom of downtown and looking at things in great detail, and holding several public workshops and a day-long charrette on Saturday that people came by to see. So we're sort of completing the charrette phase, and now we're entering into the working on the downtown design plan itself to document and develop the shared vision from based on what we've heard through all of these public engagement efforts, and then thinking about the action steps going forward to actually make implementation the final piece of the effort possible. So with the design charrette, we really are and were assessing public spaces. Some pretty basic questions. Is it a place for people? That's sort of how we came up with the Places for People name. It's a pretty basic question, but there's actually a lot to that. So is it a good public space? And if it's not, what can we do to make it one? So those were our fundamental questions. Talking about what is a good public space, there's lots of literature, and many people have gotten a PhD based on this effort of defining what good public space is. You'll see lots of lists of these are the elements that make for a good public space, but there's some real basic concepts that sort of underlie all of that. And I came up with these 4 ways of breaking up these items to kind of give you a sense of what we're looking for. So we want spaces that are comfortable. That may include that they feel safe, that they're accessible, that all people can get to them in various modes, and people of varying abilities and ages can use them, that there's places to sit and rest, there's shade on sunny days, there's warmth on cold days, there's something over your head perhaps when it's raining. They're human scaled, so you don't feel overwhelmed by the surrounding buildings or built items around you. So you feel comfortable in it. So that's comfortable. Sociable, a place that's inviting and welcoming to everyone, the diversity of people, that there are places to talk, interact, places to play, places to sit and read, that sort of thing, that this is a place where you sit and people watch, that there's an opportunity for you to meet someone, see a friend, talk to them, sit next to someone you don't know, start a conversation, that kind of place. That it's interesting. There's something interesting about it visually. It's nicely designed, there's a view, there's something, architecture around you is interesting to look at. It expresses some sort of local character, culture. There's something unique, different, identifiable about it. That it's well maintained, clean, attractive, however you want to phrase that. Those types of elements. And then a place that's active. So that includes both economically active, so that there is the businesses, there's businesses on the ground level, storefronts are open and people are coming and going. There's a diversity of uses so that people are brought into the downtown for a variety of reasons. Lots of different kinds of people at different times of the day. Complete streets, so you have lots of options for how to move around. So you can arrive in a vehicle, you can get out of the vehicle, you can walk, or you can come in on a bicycle, you can park your bicycle, you can go places. So lots of options for you, and just an interesting and active street frontage. So in looking at what are these elements of good public space and going out and assessing Brattleboro's, we've identified some challenges that downtown Brattleboro is facing, and then thought about what solutions to those could be. We're going to hit on 2 of them tonight. They're not the only ones that we came up with, and we are not going to have time to go over all the potential solutions either. But these first two challenges are probably the most directly tied to the physical form and built environment. And so we're going to focus, and we're largely the focus of what we were doing on Saturday. So that's where we are going to start. So basically, a summary of the first challenge is that there is not a coherent system of public spaces in downtown Brattleboro. Each one is sort of a one-off, unique area, not necessarily tied together into a system. And they tend to be the leftover space. Either there was a little bit of room left by in terms of how the roads were set up, or there used to be a building here and it came down, and so now we have a public space. So basically the people in parks are squeezed into that leftover space between buildings and cars. It's clearly, the design has been much more focused on designing for the buildings and cars than it has been for the parks and people. And so each piece of this system, non-system, operates on its own. There isn't a thought that, well, at a certain time of the day, for certain reasons, you might go to Pliny Park, and that has certain functions, and then another area, the Whittier Path, has other functions. They're just each sort of this individual thing, and there's not a sense of these are the full set of public space functions that we need to provide as a community, and this is how across our system we provide them. And they don't hold together as a set necessarily from a point of view of design, or there's not consistent signage, pointing people to them throughout the town. So these are the challenges. So I think I'm through the negative things, and we can move on to some of the ideas we came up with to work on this. And the basic first one that we are thinking about is a way to link as many of the public spaces as possible with a continuous bike pedestrian path. And this red line up here on the map, I really wanted to make it a green line, but the green didn't show up. So it's red. Indicates, a potential alignment for that path that we're going to explore in greater detail. And we're going to start with the big change that is slated to come to downtown Brattleboro, the replacement of the bridge to Hinsdale, which will leave a structure, possibly, behind that could be the start of a bike ped connection. So if we were to envision this bridge transformed to being a bike ped bridge, that would make this segment sort of that starting point for a way through downtown Brattleboro. It also provides people in Brattleboro a way to get across the river to a major recreation area on the other side as well. So what you could think about is that there are a number of examples. This happens to be one from Corning, New York, but there are other examples elsewhere around the country as well of bridges. This one, you see very much the same thing. You can see the new bridge was built right here. The old bridge turned into a bike ped bridge. This one redeveloped into basically a linear park with a combination of surfaces, different types of seating, some landscaping. So there's a lot of creative and interesting things you can do with the bridge structure beyond just say, hey, now it's for people and bicycles to travel on. It could really become sort of that start of a greenway park system. And then thinking about that continues on to Bridge Street. So once the new bridge is in place, the amount of traffic on Bridge Street will be substantially diminished. Basically, the only reason to pull down Bridge Street will be to go to the Whetstone, yes? Whetstone Station. Totally just blanked on that for a second. Or to get down to the depot parking lot if you're going to get to the train station, or go to the depot area park, or park there to access other things that are on this end of town. So there's going to be hardly any cars. So this is a great opportunity to think about redesigning that space. What you're seeing here in the cross section, the top one shows how that space is currently allocated. And you can see there's a very limited provision for pedestrians on the roadway currently. Most of it's given over to the vehicles. There's essentially, by the time you get up to the top, 3 lanes of traffic, and they're wide lanes at that. And so pedestrians are on a fairly narrow 6-foot sidewalk alongside the bridge, which isn't exactly 6 feet because the bridge structure actually invades into that 6 feet to some degree. So if we're looking ahead, those travel lanes can be reduced down to narrow lanes. There would be room to put in potentially a small sidewalk on the museum side of the road to allow for access to the museum, and then a much wider mixed-use path type of space on the Whetstone side. It could provide an ability, you could have both the bicycling function on it and walking and some seating to look out at the brook. So you could think of this as being in the cross sections. It shows it being curved, but another approach to think about is a street that's just a walking. It's a mixed space that vehicles can come down, but is just generally open to bicycling and walking as well. Usually they get a different surface treatment as shown in that photo, so it gives a signal to drivers that they're in shared space and they're not necessarily the priority user of that space, and they need to make their way through the pedestrians and bicyclists with care. So there are different ways of envisioning what that could be and how you could set that up, but traffic levels would be low enough to allow for that type of space, in addition to just putting in reduced, as an alternative to just doing reduced lanes and widening out the sidewalk area. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul for this segment as we continue along to the Whetstone Pathway.
Sure. So we explored during the Charrette some, continuing to link our public spaces along the Whetstone Path and think about how, the pedestrian and, accommodating, multi-use path, for biking could continue to flow. And we noticed that the current design of the Whetstone Path has a strong corridor that has a destination of the co-op. And we felt with the new improvement of, the future improvement of the bridge, pedestrian way, and this flow is also important to channel that perhaps. So one idea we had in the Charrette was to actually focus and funnel that flow through the space here, and then maybe add some more green space to the Whetstone Path area, because there's another idea to continue and link another segment of the path to Brattleboro neighborhoods back behind the co-op parking lot. So, and in doing that, that kind of displaces some of the food gardens that are along the parking area as well. So we thought, all right, so let's think about how we can transition some of the food gardens here, make them more prominent, and have this flow continue. Another idea to help improve this as well, which was brought up by Ward, one of the other consultants on our team, was to perhaps exchange some of the parking spaces to have this more open, so that maybe perhaps a parklet could come into play here in lieu of having some of these spaces, because we actually can gain 4 spaces back if this pedestrian way was changed back to flow in this direction. There's more improvement area there. So these are some of the things that we're thinking about when it comes to the design of the space, and we'll continue to do that as we move into the next segment of the next phase of this project. So.
Okay. Well, I think there were more slides. Yes, so this one does show the parklet type idea that I think is something that you could envision taking some components of the parking lot and potentially extending more green space into, or seating or something, to better connect the pathway and with the front of the building, the co-op building. So continuing along and across the Whetstone over to the Preston lot, we're looking, like Paul was saying, that continuous line. If you go walk this now, you'll see that there's a lot of cutting right here anyway. So The line that people want to go is already well marked out on the ground there. And so this takes that through to connect that important piece of your public space into the system. Keeps the alignment that was there, because that will facilitate continuing on to other portions of downtown if you're not going to the transportation center. And then it takes part of the idea that was in the Lower Whetstone corridor plan that you have for converting Preston to a park instead of a parking lot. It takes one of the bays away of parking and sort of steps into that plan partially, which both could allow for some flood storage potentially, depending on how it's designed, or it could provide some more outdoor seating and ability to access and enjoy the Whetstone, at least visually, if not actually physically. So those are our thoughts there as we're discussing. We're going to come up to a slide at some point to talk about parking need and weighing the various places, whether this surface parking lot directly across from a parking garage is the best place to have a surface parking lot to that extent.
One thing I'd like to mention too is that when we took the back row of parking out to accommodate that park that has this view to the brook, is that we made the front parking area include perpendicular spaces, which actually add to how many spaces you would have anyway. When you have diagonal parking spaces as you have now, you have less spaces available because they are taking up more space than you need. So what we did is, we've taken out the back bay, but at the same time we've increased parking in the front bay as well. So we're thinking of how best to, not just accommodate the pedestrian flow in these green spaces, but we're thinking about the vehicular uses as well and trying to accommodate those as best we can.
So the next one is yours, getting up the hill. So the path leads you to the transportation center where you're faced with a cliff.
All right, so one of the thoughts here is for those who live in the area, they understand the flow more than anyone else, right? So they can get to the transportation hub, walk over to the stairwell that's in the building and get up and get over to the upper road. But for those visiting, a lot of times they'll see the end of the path and they're like, all right, that's it, I gotta go around the block, I don't know. But so one thought is to keep the vision of this strong corridor, especially once the bridge changes over and we start looking at linking all our public spaces together. So of course, if you go to Fenway Park, you see one side of Fenway Park have the stairway going up along the whole side of it. So it's not just rotating the stairway in a building form. It's the corridor itself. So visually you see it. So you could do that. You could also, in some other towns, they have what's called a funicular, which is a device that can help transport on a track that goes up a steep slope. Mm-hmm. So that's just another idea. And these are just thoughts that are being generated out of this Charrette process that we've had. So just think about that vision. So there is a crosswalk at the top that you cross over and you're right there and you can see that flow, but then you have to turn and walk into the garage and then go down the stairway. So it was interesting to see that because you could actually have a connection that just goes, slightly down at a grade to get to one of the lower stair bays as well. So there's a combination of things that could happen depending on cost in terms of thinking that through. But you still have a corridor, you still have a link now. It's just, this is the thinking of behind that to have that vision through. So.
Yeah. I mean, the structure itself can function to get pedestrians and bicyclists from the elevation of Flat, between the elevations of Flat and Elliot. Perhaps there's lots of creative ways to expand on that. Keeping the elevator functioning would obviously help for those people for whom the stairs are a problem. These things are just ways, maybe you've seen these if you have a bicycle and you're on the stairs. particularly if you have a longer run, to just help you glide your bicycle up the stairs. So there are different technologies and avenues out there to think about ways to use that site and structure as a way to provide access between the two street levels without having to go out onto Main Street. So thinking of this path continuing on, so if we're on Elliot Street now, thinking of how the path can funnel its way through the series of parking lots. So through Harmony, through High Grove, and ultimately here to the we're not at the municipal building tonight. So it's not here, to the municipal building, that parking area, and then potentially beyond that, as if the community continues to work on bike and pedestrian pathways. So the one thing to think about in those settings, as we're envisioning this, is to think about the winter use and maintenance of this. So while it's possible, and there are pedestrian ways through most of these parking lots, they're often not sort of a central feature. They may not be wide enough to accommodate bicycling as well. And then there's the question of maintenance in the winter. So thinking about ways to do this that are sort of at surface grade with the parking, that are wide enough to be plowed. They may be differentiated by material or color. This is not exactly an example of a bikeway, but it is an example of a bulb out and crosswalk that's just done by paint and some stick-up bollards. That type of thing is something that could be fairly easily deployed into many of these parking lots and maintained. You could, plow this bike pedestrian path with a pickup truck with a plow on it, and thus keep it open in the winter. I think that's essential to think about as we're looking at how to put this together. Someone did suggest at one of the earlier meetings that Montreal has heated the sidewalks, so we should too. But until you get to the point of heating the sidewalks, I think thinking about how the stuff is going to be plowed in the winter is important. So thinking that, so for instance, this is the entrance to the Harmony lot. If the path came through there, basically taking the parking that's currently angled in and converting over to a parallel road, thus gaining the space necessary to put the pathway in alongside the sidewalk, and that could be at parking lot at grade with the cars there, and therefore be a lot easier to keep maintained in the winter. And then another avenue to think about, and this is one that we looked at particularly in High Grove, where there is already sort of that central aisle that's a combination of hardscaping and trees. There certainly are ways to incorporate green stormwater infrastructure into these spaces and into that kind of a bike pedestrian path with permeable paving and collection systems and cells under that, so that you're filtering and cleaning the water before it reaches your stormwater outlets and goes back out to the brook or the river. So thinking about the materials again, the permeable paving and concretes have been a bit of a challenge for vehicle areas in Vermont, but on something that's going to be used for a bike pedestrian pathway, it's a lot more possible to use. So then it comes to the question of, if you're going to put all of these paths through the series of parking lots, what does that mean for parking? So it does mean that some reduction in the number of parking spaces in basically each of the lots. So reallocate some space to the pedestrian realm, and to think about it. Every time someone shows up in the parking lot with a car, they get out of the car, they are a pedestrian. So the parking lot, if it's only serving motorists, is actually not serving its customers very well, because they are both motorists and pedestrians. So they need to be able to safely get from the parking lot to their destination on foot. So there was a parking study done, a very detailed parking study done between 2017 and 2018. So there are current numbers in terms of how much the parking is used. What you're seeing up here on the screen shows you these 4 parking facilities, public parking facilities, but there's also information about the on-street parking use and the private parking use as well. So if you're interested in delving more into the question of how much parking is there downtown and how much are we actually using, there's a lot of really good information there. I think the little factoid is very important, that the occupancy rate in the off-street lots in the garage was on average 55% during the weekday and 38% during the weekend. So there is a lot of excess capacity in public parking and in the private parking as well. There are places and times where there are pinch points, where there's demand. So the Preston lot fills up when there's something at the Latches. There's a couple of the blocks that have higher on-street usage than anywhere else. But as a system, there's a lot of excess capacity. So figuring out where you can change some of that space over to being used for bikes and pedestrians, and that's something we're going to be looking at in more detail. And then thinking about where it is you want to encourage parking and using various policies that you have, how long you're going to time the spaces for, the cost of the spaces. These all can affect people's parking behavior. Clearly, you want your parking structure to be as full as possible, and so thinking about how to make that an inviting space for people. I don't know if any parking garage is really inviting, but at least tolerable. A space that people will be willing to park in. And some of that, I think the town has been working on in terms of maintenance and lighting and general cleanup of the facility, but it's an ongoing issue. And one that needs, I think probably every municipality that has a parking garage has similar struggles around those issues of keeping it maintained and in good condition. So that's, I think, a conversation to be continued to have, but this is something we talked about a fair amount with people who came through and during the various sessions. I think a lot of people perceive there to be not enough parking, mostly based on looking at the on-street parking, perhaps just on Main Street. But if you look more broadly than that, there is, in most of the public parking space lots, ample room to think about what else you could do with that space, some of that space. So that sort of concludes what we thought about the first challenge and some of the possible ways to work on it. And the second one talk is that many of the public spaces in downtown Brattleboro are not accessible or comfortable. Particularly, we're hearing this particularly in the survey results. More than 400 people at this point have taken the survey, and this is a fairly consistent theme that we are hearing in those comments. So Main Street it's a space for vehicles. It's dominated by vehicle traffic and parking, and traffic doesn't flow well, particularly at certain times of the day, due to conflicts between the various flows of traffic. And that includes pedestrians and vehicle traffic. There's a lot of conflict points along the way. We can't do much about the hills, but that's obviously going to be a major roadblock for people who have mobility challenges. And the hilly terrain, when you combine that with winter, is a real difficulty. So as much as possible, we can think about ways to improve that and provide alternative routes. But there's the question of maintenance practices. There's looking at where there are a lot of stairs, and are those stairs in good conditions. This last photo is a little dark, but probably most of you recognize it as the library space, where not a single piece of concrete is going in the same direction. And this is the sort of thing where if you're walking, this can be challenging terrain for anyone to use. To say nothing if you're trying to push a stroller or navigate in a wheelchair or scooter or something like that. So we also have, these sidewalks are narrow, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the sidewalks. So there are trees, which is nice, but sometimes they're sort of where you might want to walk. There are signs, which are helpful, but sometimes also where you might want to walk. There's other stuff, mailboxes, utility poles, planters. There's a few places where there's seating, not very many, because there's not very many places where it's possible. But if you actually go out and look at the sidewalks, well, they might technically be 6 foot or 8 foot wide. In many places, they have been narrowed considerably due to the way that they have been used over time to hold stuff. So what we are thinking about, and I realize I was going to do one slide before this, but I didn't do it, so we'll just start with this one, is to think about traffic flow as a potential solution to this challenge. That the congestion relates right back to how the traffic flows. And obviously the change to the bridge is going to change the traffic flow and provides an opportunity to try to make that traffic flow better. If traffic was flowing better, there would be less noise, there would be less congestion. So what can we do to try to improve traffic flow? So the one idea that we are playing with is trying to get traffic up the hill without stopping. Because that's is really one of the pinch points and one of the points of creating a lot of noise challenges in downtown Brattleboro, is that traffic starts down at the bottom at the Malfunction Junction. It has to navigate through Flat and Elliot before reaching High Street, where the terrain finally levels off. And if you stop on the hill and you're a truck, you're going to make noise when you start again. And it's going to be challenging. So as much as we can improve that flow to reduce the numbers of times people have to stop and the amount of traffic that has to stop. And if you're sitting there idling, it's also, vehicles are loud when they're sitting there idling. A loud motorcycle going by you is an annoyance for some fraction of a second. One that's sitting there waiting for a light is an annoyance for a very long time. So that's something to think about. How can the flow improve some of the impacts that you are, or reduce some of the impacts you're having from traffic downtown? So beginning looking at Flat Street, this is, we've had a lot of suggestions over the last few days about making one or all or some portion of streets pedestrian or one-way, or in other ways trying to reduce the cars downtown. We think the most viable one is to think about Flat Street and to make Flat Street one way from Main Street to the transportation center. And that would allow for, if not the entire elimination of the light, so the need for vehicles to come to a stop on Main Street on the hill, at least a significant reduction. The question of whether you'd still need a light for pedestrian crossing is something we're still thinking about there. But that's one possibility to think about, and then that opens up some possibilities of what you could do with Flat Street. So this is how Flat Street is currently configured. Once again, it's got fairly narrow 6-foot sidewalks, and the rest of the space, there's a parking lane and very wide drive lanes and a shoulder throughout most of it. So it's a lot of space for what is essentially 2 lanes of traffic and parking. So options include putting an on-road bike track, a cycle track it's called, where you have 2-way bike traffic buffered from the vehicle lane to provide that bikeway to Main Street. I know the Brattleboro Active Transportation Coalition for Active Transportation, some combination of those letters, BCAT, is definitely interested in that, trying to make a bikeway coming in. It's been working on that through a series of initiatives. This could sort of be the culmination point where this ends, and we do allow for full 2-way bike traffic in this area. And you would still have room for an ample sidewalk. You could split that between the 2 sides, or you could give one side quite a bit of depth and just keep a walk, a basic walkway sidewalk on one side and much more depth on the other side, where there could be planting, you'd have room for outdoor seating, you have a lot of options of how to use that space.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So when you say that, would the biking be one way?
No, in this setup, the biking is 2-way. When you do this and you buffer it, you need to have some sort of a buffer. You may or may not want to have an actual physical barrier or bollards or something of that nature, or just a striped buffer. And then you can have two-way traffic. This one is set up to be 15, so I think it's two 6-foot bike lanes, so assuming there's two 6-footers going back and forth, and then about a 3-foot buffer between the bikes and the traffic area.
May I ask again? So the vehicle would be going from east to west one way?
It would be coming from Main Street into flat towards
East to west,
transportation.
okay.
Yeah, don't get me started on the east, south, northwest thing. I'll mess that up for sure. So, looking at other components of the system, so trying to reconfigure the lanes and time the lights so that you can get from the bottom to the top in one go. And this is the dream. And under the current traffic flow, it's been impossible to make this happen, although I think you have tried over the years to adjust the lights to try to get to something closer to this. So the reconfiguration offers some improvement potential, I think, that could allow this to happen. So if we look at, this is looking, if you are on Main Street and you are looking south towards the intersection, this would be the profile right now.
You're
So
looking north. The
yeah.
way that's drawn, you're looking north.
Oh, am I? Okay. Well.
West, east, therefore.
Yeah. Okay. So you got two 6-foot. I'm really bad at this north, south, east, west thing. I have to like really think about it. This is probably not good for a planner, but it's the way it is. So you've got the two 6-foot sidewalks for the. You've got the turning lanes for the traffic that's headed south. So there's two lanes there. So there's the traffic moving onto Canal, and the traffic that's going to make the turn into or go towards Bridge Street or Vernon Street. And then the traffic that's coming in has 28 feet or 26 feet plus a 3-foot shoulder. It's a lot, this is just big space that's undefined. And the reason there's a big space that's undefined here is that the traffic that's coming off of Bridge Street has to make a very hard right turn. So if you're in a truck and you have to make that hard right turn, you need some maneuvering room. And if there's really two lanes of traffic coming into that space when the light turns, so the co-op traffic is also coming out and merging into that lane at the same time that the Vernon Street and traffic is coming. So it doesn't have any lines, but in reality it's actually two lanes, kind of. So there's that huge space, and that need for all that space will go away to some extent with the readjustment in where the traffic is coming from. So large trucks will no longer need to make a hard right turn. They'll be coming from Vernon and can sort of ease into this lane, and it's not a sharp turn anymore. So with that in mind, it's possible to compress that amount of space in the intersection, so that you would still have the 3 lanes, but you could really end up with 11-foot lanes for turning, and in fact you could end up with lanes to turn right into the co-op, to continue straight onto Canal, or to turn left and go most likely on Vernon, but potentially also for the traffic that would want to go down Bridge Street. So you could have more constant movement, particularly the traffic moving into the co-op. That right turn could move a lot more traffic through, so that piece keeps flowing. And then you really just need the one lane coming north. So it allows the widening out of the sidewalks along the bridge to some degree.
Question about that? So this is like we're standing in Malfunction Junction looking up Main Street at now 3 lanes of traffic coming down toward us, but only 1 lane going up Main Street.
Right.
But feeding into that now 1 lane going up Main Street is all the traffic that's going to come from the new bridge up Vernon Street, plus the traffic that used to come up Vernon Street, plus the traffic coming from Canal and the traffic coming out of the co-op. So even though there's not a need for much traffic making a hard right turn from Bridge Street, there's no reason to think that there's less traffic coming,
isn't
starting
less-
at Main Street
yeah, there
there.
isn't less
But it's
traffic.
all gonna get funneled into one lane?
There isn't less traffic. What you have changed is the angle at which the traffic is coming, which is the primary reason for all of that space, is to allow a tractor trailer to make that right-hand turn. Although there is also the timing of the lights question that lets 2 lanes of cars come into. So you'd also be looking at setting this up so that you were not allowing 2 lanes of cars to merge into the intersection and up the lane, up here at the same time. So the system of lights and signals, that's one of the things that the town and who are working on the bridge are working on right now, to think about how those can be set up. They're obviously going to change from how they're currently set up.
So it would be reasonable to assume that whatever relief is gained from Malfunction Junction North on Main Street is maybe comes at the expense of traffic backups coming into Malfunction Junction from the south. Like you're just going to get less of that traffic into Main Street and up Main Street, or it's going to slower than.
It is only one lane.
Yeah, that's how it is now.
Yeah.
It's one lane now, it'll be one lane in the
It's one lane now,
It's
northward.
So that the fact that it's so wide, like it's a funnel right now feeding into one lane, you're saying that doesn't really make a difference as far as how much traffic is getting
The big
through the
issue,
junction.
yeah, the right turn lane here, because it's even less than a 90 degree, and it's, so that's the issue. So now with the new bridge configuration, right, coming this way, it's more streamlined, you know, in the new.
You guys are saying it's one lane now, it's going to be one lane then.
Yeah, it's no different.
The throughput would be the same.
Except right now you get like 2 lanes that come
That's-
through the
if
junction
that's a
and then they
question-
turn into one
But
lane.
that's more a question of the timing of the lights, of who goes with whom when the lights turn. So, yeah, so if you were to think about it, if the lights were set up differently and the traffic that was going to turn left out of the co-op went at the same time as the traffic that was going to come from Vernon and go to Canal, those 2 movements could happen simultaneously, right? So it's a matter of figuring out which movements can be paired up and then redoing the flow. So, you
And the
know,
signal timing and, yeah, the placement, it's a combination of those things, because as it's functioning now, it's so much wider that even after the signals stop, people could be just stuck there in the intersection. There's still room for the, you know, the next street to go through. So, and that's what's happening. So,
yeah. And of course, you're not going to have the backup generated by the train anymore either, which will be a major improvement to flow, just at its basis. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to correct, so the town is not currently working on re-signalizing the intersection. We have been talking with the Vermont Agency of Transportation, and everybody recognizes that when the bridge does go in, it's going to need to be re-signalized, so just don't want you to be expecting something.
Jump the gun there.
Yeah.
Right. So there are other, let's see here where I'm going here. So this is looking, yes, also at Main Street. So I think I went backwards and forwards. Okay. So looking at Vernon Street. So this is another street that will be affected by the change of traffic flows. So this is currently what you've got. So this is Plaza Park on this side, and this is the museum lawn over here. So if you're sitting there and you're looking towards Main Street, this is the configuration right now. Again, it's fairly wide travel lanes. There's 3 of them, and then shoulders on the one side and fairly narrow 6-foot sidewalks on each side. So one of the things that we were exploring is exactly what is the purpose of Plaza Park and what does it do. In many ways, it's kind of like the center of a roundabout, but there really isn't a full roundabout. I mean, it's not a space that you can easily get to. And so it raises the question of, is it a space you need to get to, or is it a space like the center of a roundabout that should be an aesthetic enhancement, a gateway, but not necessarily a place that needs to be ringed with a sidewalk that people, need to walk around the outside of, because as soon as you come around the corner, the sidewalk ends anyway and you're faced with a cliff. So it's not a sidewalk that's going to a lot of places. It's mostly just walking around the park. So if you can get into the Plaza Park area from, say, around the Holstein Association building in front of the co-op, there's a question of whether there needs to be a sidewalk continuing around the outside of it. And if you eliminate that and just reduce the width of the lanes a bit to 11-foot travel lanes, which are now the standard. It's used more frequently than the 12-foot lanes. 12-foot travel lanes are an older V-Trans standard at this point. You then get a much wider sidewalk in front of the museum. And what this allows is getting past the wall. There's a lot of things in Brattleboro that involve trying to get around a big change in elevation. So if the sidewalk extends further out, you can actually get in front of and down and around the retaining wall and start your way down Bridge Street on the museum side, so that people, say, who want to come to this museum and come in the front door, who park back in Depot Street, can walk up a sidewalk a long ways alongside the building and end up in the front. So that's one option to think about there. There could be some slight shifting and re-angling of the roadway at that point a little bit, which could facilitate more space as well. But even if if the road stays exactly where it is, if the space is reallocated, I think it may be enough to get in front of the wall.
In addition to that, when we take a look at how the traffic's going to change, and then, I guess, not so need to turn right onto Bridge Street as much, the right turn lane as shown in this cross section may not be necessary as much.
I should explain, Paul. This is confusing. I probably should not have used the right turn. That is actually not right onto Bridge. That's just onto
gotcha.
Main.
And that one goes back.
That's on.
All right.
So you've got Main and Canal essentially, but you could make the Bridge Street turn obviously from that point too. But the primary traffic, assumably, would be going to Main Street from there. Yeah. So.
Okay.
It's hard to when it isn't actually a rectangular intersection. Which way to make the arrows go is a bit of a quandary.
But you're still going to be able to turn right down to the Westtown Station.
You could.
Yeah.
Yep.
So basically, that one on the right is straight or right. You could turn
Okay, because people
straight,
coming
but it's
across
kind
from
of
New Hampshire to Glen Park.
To the Amtrak station are
Yep.
going to need to
You're
turn
going to need to
right.
make that turn. Yep. So I think, Paul, we're up to the Harmony parking lots.
Right.
This is another item we looked at.
So one thing we recognized on our walk and talk tours on was it Friday?
Friday.
I'm trying to remember.
It's all
So
blurred.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So on Friday was, we had people mention that, this Harmony lot space is a place where a lot of people had a lot of memories since childhood and activities and just meeting people, and it's a very active pedestrian space, even though it's got a lot of parking back there. And then we looked at the analysis too of the, which Brandy brought up before, of current use at peak periods, the Harmony lot and the adjacent, the garage. The garage, I think, at peak is 57%, the Harmony lot's at 82%. So the need for parking there is still important, but the fact that this pleasant space and area has so much pedestrianism and activity kind of asks the question, can we enhance some more pedestrian area, multi-use space back here? And, so this concept is just kind of a result of seeing what could be done to still maintain the public lot and the private lot, and then still maintain access to the ATM, and then some parking here, but taking just a little piece of it based on those percentages for additional, pedestrian use space. And then adding maybe some special paving and hardscape area here, so there's still vehicular and maintenance access that may need to happen to businesses and buildings there. Maybe a structure that's open air that could be used for small little activities, maybe a little band or something like that. They could play to a little green space, and then an open green that could be used for a variety of purposes. You know, you could be having, you know, breakfast or dinner here in an outdoor cafe, and then, you know, with your family and your kids could just run around in the green right there while you're having your coffee, you know. So I think, you know, this is just something that came out of the Charrette process when we were talking to people about this space and trying to think about the pedestrianism. Of course, Ward on our team was talking about eliminating a lot of parking because he loved a lot of
Yes.
yeah.
The idea that this is your living room
Yeah.
is Ward's. We have to credit Ward with that.
Sure.
We can't repeat the rest of what he said about what you should do with the cars, but he, you know, and I think this is an open question. Could more parking be eliminated? How much parking is needed here? I mean, we are definitely seeing in the survey results, a lot of people talk about Harmony Lot as sort of the public gathering space. And it certainly makes a lot more sense to look at this space off Main Street, away from the 20,000 cars a day going up and down, as a space to provide that kind of outdoor seating and outdoor gathering place that people clearly wish there was along Main Street. And there just is a lot of reasons why that quality of space is probably not feasible on Main Street, but right behind those in the back of the buildings, it very well could be. So looking at that, you know, this is the remainder of the public parking here. These buildings already have some space behind them, some hardscape plaza space behind them. That could be extended, leaving just a small amount of parking like there is over here. Or you know, we've got this piece and leave the rest of the parking in place. So those are questions to look at. We may show a couple of alternatives of this in the plan.
I'm just having trouble orienting. What is the green space currently?
It's currently parking spaces.
But, okay, give me a building.
back of the Works.
Back of the Works.
Yeah, the Works is in here, and yeah,
Like
there's
those red
basically you
tables.
pull in, and there's another way to pull out through. So there's
Okay, so if
parking
that's
here
the
and
back of the
parking
Works,
there.
then the
Yep.
triangle there is Brooks House? The triangle there
Yes,
is...
heading towards.
Yeah, you start, yeah, the Brooks House goes up here, the parking continues, it goes through the tunnel up there. Well, the tunnel goes through it, the parking doesn't go through it. But, yeah. So there's private parking along here, up in there as well, and then you come up to the back of the Brooks House.
So there's definitely some trade-offs to think about because, you know, you've got the garage that's very close to this space. And are more people willing to park there perhaps? We're at 82% on the peak period here. Would it get to 100%? Is it worth accommodating additional pedestrian space for these kinds of activities? So it's all that to think about. So.
So in looking at Main Street, so I did just say that, you know, probably getting to the quality and amenity of public space that you could do behind the buildings is not necessarily possible on the front. There are some things to think about and some possibilities. Clearly, right now, there is an effort to make the sidewalks as inviting as possible in many locations through plantings, through outdoor seating where it can be, but it's tight, as this picture shows us here. So if we want to widen the sidewalks on Main Street and add bike lanes, both of which are ideas that have garnered quite a bit of support in the survey, for example, what would that take? So if you look at the current configuration, you can see that pedestrians are allocated exactly 16 feet of the 66 feet available, which means that 50 feet of it goes to cars, 2 lanes of parking, and essentially 3 travel lanes. And they're wide travel lanes as well, but they're 12 lanes, 12-foot lanes. So if you reduce the travel lanes down, still you need that number of lanes really to make things work. And you get rid of parking from one side, you have enough room to say add bike lanes. You could do that within the current footprint without changing anything other than the striping. And that would get the bike lanes. It does not necessarily create a great amenity in terms of the experience, but it allows you to a space for biking up and down. If you said, well, you know, there aren't bike lanes now, and I don't plan to bike on Main Street anytime soon, so I would rather see sidewalks. You could do the same thing, take that space from the one park, taking away one side parking, and reallocate that and give it to sidewalk. It probably would make more sense to make one side, to give one side more room so that you actually have enough space to do some meaningful public amenities. So some real room for larger plantings or seating and more space generally. So this one is set up with 16 on, did I say 16? I think it's 16 on one side and leaving the 8 on the other.
May I?
Did you have a question?
I would really love to see some accommodation for bicyclists because it is really difficult, and I do bike on Main Street. Sometimes it's just the easiest way to get somewhere, but it's fraught with danger with the opening of people's car doors, and you know they don't see you, and trucks sometimes have things on the back of them that can like stick out and catch you. So I would love to see the bicyclist on the sidewalk, like they do in Europe, which makes it even safer. Not that they would be going with pedestrians, so to speak, but they would have their lane, but it would be on the sidewalk.
So there are some transportation reasons why that isn't as commonly done in the United States, but it is a policy decision. So I mean that is one thing to think about. I will say that these 5-foot bike lanes, they're sort of the minimum you would want. You would really prefer that they be wider, and they are going to have issues on the side with the parked cars and people opening their doors into the bike lane space. So it's a tight, it fits, but it's a tight fit, and it's not the best amenity ever. So there's a question in the back and then here. In the back?
So, I'm a bicyclist too, and I usually run with my service dog, and I would much prefer to be on a wider sidewalk as well for safety, and also because being so close to the cars, like I get pretty sick even if I'm trying to wear a mask filter from the car fumes. So being around more plants, closer to plants, seems much more optimal to me.
We were in Portsmouth weekend before last, and I saw an unusual arrangement that I'd never seen anywhere else before. I've spent a lot of time in Boulder where bike paths are everywhere. If you're drawing here with your bike paths, switch the parked car
And put the bike on the inside. Yeah, you can do that too.
It doesn't eliminate the open door.
It doesn't, but it does give you a little more, the bicyclist more buffer. So
Yeah.
it's a question of thinking about how you consider the bicyclist. So some transportation planners consider the bicyclist a vehicle, essentially. And you know, so there's this idea that you are keeping the moving vehicular traffic. And there's some reasons to think about that, which is why they don't like, some people get freaked out over the lane, the combined track where the bicycles are moving in both directions on one side, because they really want the bicycle to be like the other vehicles and to maintain the flow. And that certainly makes sense when you come to places like intersections, where the bicycle does need to sort of go with the vehicle traffic to work its way through the intersection. So there are some complexities. And one of the reasons we're really talking about trying to build that bike ped spine off of Main Street is because this is not for the recreational biker. This is for a serious biker who's willing to bike in urban traffic. And so that tends, you know, that's a subset of people who would bike. And some of the, you know, some people are definitely up for doing that and are comfortable, if not exactly enamored of doing it, and are perfectly fine functioning essentially as a vehicle in a lane of traffic. Whereas for a lot of bicyclists, you know, that is not a comfortable situation.
I definitely need to comment on that because it's really difficult if you are a bicyclist and someone honks at you, for instance, it's terrifying. It can throw you right off the bike. because the sound of a truck honking or a car honking is pretty outrageous. So that's one thing, and I like what she said about the exhaust fumes. It's really tough when you're working really hard to get up that hill, which it does take a lot of energy. You're really inhaling and exhaling a lot of exhaust fumes. So being in the traffic lane makes it difficult. And I just want to appreciate that the cars don't like us to be in their lane.
True.
I have tried to be in their lane, and they really don't like it. They try to go around me. They actually take risks to get around me and to push me over. So it's not that easy to kind of...
I'm not suggesting that it's easy.
Yeah.
I'm saying that these are the different approaches to thinking about how bicycles fit into the transportation system.
So my question on flipping the lanes was, do you have any knowledge or experience of whether or not that works?
I have seen it as well. I think it's a fairly new street profile. I would have to do some research to see what it does, what the results are in terms of accidents and questions like that. But it is a profile you are starting to see. And
Can you go back to the slide?
the previous one.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is taking these parked cars, right, and placing them here, and taking this lane and placing it there, so it's a little more protected.
Correct.
Yes.
What do you do with passengers getting out of the car then? It's sort of the same thing.
It's the same open door thing, but you're away from the fumes and away from the moving vehicles.
Okay.
So most people are
The
driving.
passengers might look.
So we have a question in the back, and then Steph.
I'm sorry I missed the earlier part, so I hope this isn't a repeated question, but for the request for bid proposals, has there been pricing offered for how much it would cost to have the sidewalks and roads be solar panels like is happening in parts of Europe now?
No, I mean, that's really beyond the scope of the master plan. And I just saw a photo of those front solar panel roads. They didn't really hold up very well. So you should look for those photos of the broken up solar panels.
We have to do a Vermont version. I think that that should be part of the future master plan.
Do you have, so a lot of the discussion has been that we have enough parking and that we can take parking away from places. Does your knowledge or do the studies show that if you take away parking, it'll be absorbed in the places where people are not using the parking?
So I think it's got to be a combination of efforts. So you have to have the policies in the other parking facilities also support doing that. So looking at the time that people are allowed to be in the pricing of parking will help guide that. And then also consistently signing the parking, I think, helps too, so people can find the parking. So there's a number of ways. I mean, I don't think that you would necessarily, and you're going to need some accessible parking on Main Street, clearly. There needs to be drop-off and pick-up areas for businesses. So there's going to have to be some flexibility on the use of that space that's currently parking lanes. But whether, a full two-sided parking lanes are needed all the way along much of Main Street, when there is off-street surface lot and garage parking, within a block, in most places, I think is a good question. And if you want a Main Street that feels more walkable, then clearly it can't be 16 feet for pedestrians and 50 feet for cars.
I would imagine the parking study would talk about that Main Street parking and
There are, so that does give you the the amount of parking used in each block face, and they vary. So there are some of them that are basically popular spots and consistently used. There were some recommendations in there around pricing to try to start to alter people's behavior patterns a bit, which I don't know how much of that the town's actually pursued doing. But that's essentially what municipalities usually do, is that they change the pricing to try to drive people to the parking lots they want them to use, and the amount of time you're allowed to be in a spot. Okay, I'm gonna move forward here through.
So can I just ask my question in a more pointed way? I'm sorry. I was just thinking about your answer. So you take away Main Street parking or you take away Harmony parking. You're taking away people's favorite spots. But we all know there's enough parking. And so you know that what they'll say is, oh, okay, well then, obviously, I'm not gonna come downtown because you're taking away my favorite spots. And so do the studies show, do other towns show that it's okay, they'll change their behavior in a matter of, because you're directing them to cheaper parking, you're directing them to longer parking, so that's not the question. Like, how long does the backlash last?
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, there's probably some studies and analysis that are out there, but certainly, you know, municipalities take these kind of actions, and people continue to come downtown. I mean, I think if you made Main Street a more pleasant environment for people to walk, you could actually argue you're going to draw more people to come. You may have a few people who, if you take away their absolutely only spot that they, you know, ever park in to go to, you know, location A, maybe you have one or two people who will, you know, stop going to location A, but I think most people are open enough to changing their behavior patterns if you show them.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, something I can look into. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, if you changed any parking anywhere, no one would ever come back. We know people do survive, relearn the spaces.
And then after a while, this is just how it is, and nobody, you know, it's not like you live the rest of your life remembering the parking spot that was there 40 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Wish I could go down.
I mean, I can say that this is a very small scale example, but it happened the last year and a half or so. I was going to the Warren Planning Commission every month, and they redid the parking on Main Street in Warren. I grant you it's like 5 spaces in Warren Village, but people came for months and were outraged over the rearrangement. They couldn't figure out how to park, but somewhere after about 6 months or so, no one came anymore. So I assume they figured out how to park. So I think that's the type of thing that, you know, yes, when you make a change, it's a big deal, but it does become, people acclimate.
And you're also encouraging bicycle use, and then there's also a plan for non-handicap spaces. Or that's changed too.
Right.
And it's the complete streets approach, right? So we're not just accommodating the vehicle. It seems vehicle dominated. We have a lot of lots. We've got a parking facility. We've got on-street parking on both sides. So how much is going to be dedicated to the car, right? So we also need to accommodate the bikers, the walkers, the people with the strollers. And when this bridge changes, oh my gosh, you're going to be attracting people from out of town as well to do a bike loop and go home back to. So it's going to be amazing. So it's like, what are the trade-offs and what do we need to do to provide complete streets to everyone in all forms of transportation, right? So it's definitely something to think about, and success is a choice. You know, it's like if we choose to add some more pedestrian space and there's less parking there and they have to go park over here, that change may make someone, as it begins to happen, a little bit grumpy, but then when they see how wonderful that new space gets to be used in such a way that's inviting more people and activity and events and accommodating it, it's that success is a choice thing. It's like now what we've done is accommodating more that enhances your town. So, and those activities in the town, and provides more opportunities for the businesses as well. So if you can have outdoor seating, you know, that you know can be next to that restaurant, you know, that's a wonderful thing. So I'm sure back when they went through a process like this in Burlington for Church Street, and they go, we're going to get rid of this street, and you know, and all these businesses won't have, you know, the ability to have cars pull right up and come out and go to CVS, you know, and it's definitely a change, you know, but we're trying to you know, look at it in such a way that's realistic as well. So the Harmony lot, for instance, you know, we wouldn't want to take it all away and just put pedestrian, you know, park back there. You know? So I mean, we're listening to you all and trying to, you know, filter through that. So, yeah.
So the question I would have is, how did Church Street then receive shipments to the different stores?
So they do drive up early morning hours. If you ever go to Church Street, 5, 6, 7, even 8 a.m., there's still cars that can pull down it. So it's They pull right up, and that's the idea here with the Harmony lot, that paver space with the tables and chairs. Those are movable tables and chairs, so you can move them out of the way, then the trucks and maintenance can come back there, right to the facilities and still, accommodate the uses that need to happen to help the businesses function. But those businesses also benefit because they have, like on Church Street, the ability to then put their chairs out after the vehicular traffic goes away to service the businesses and, make some money off of people coming and using the shops and all those activities. So, that's the thing to think about. It's like, what do we need to do to really excite people about coming, to our businesses and our places and you already have that. This is just kind of enhancing it and a little bit more.
So I want to just let me do the last slide and then we'll come back around. So there's one final cross section here to think about. What if you had no on-street parking in segments? Now, obviously, you couldn't do this up and down the entirety of Main Street because, as we discussed, there needs to be accessibility spaces. There needs to probably be some loading and drop-off type of spaces. But in chunks and in segments, there's the possibility that you could go the full way and take away the parking altogether and then have additional space. So this shows that with bike lanes, which are really more usable buffered bikeways, lanes that would create a safer and more pleasant biking environment, plus wider sidewalks on each side. And once again, you'd have that choice about whether you wanted to, have more sidewalks on one side or the other, and sort of have one that's more of a get where you need to go kind of walking street, and one that's got more space for seating and other amenities. So those are, just if you're thinking about the space that's there and what you can do with it. We did this whole exercise during the Charrette where we actually let people have these little pieces and cut them out, and I had to cut them out. I did not make people cut them out. I spent a lot of time helping Amy cutting out these little pieces.
Each one of these was a different...
Little pieces and letting people build their own streets. And so we got lots of different ideas about how you could put streets together. I taught Sue's daughter an important fact about parking lanes needing to not be right abutting the building, because otherwise you couldn't open your car doors. So it was a good exercise to sort of see, like, this is how much space we have, what could we do with it? So that's something that other folks can explore too, think about. And you had a comment or question in the back?
Is there any measurement increase for the space around the trees? Because I know they've been very condensed and like bonsai almost from how little space they've been given to grow.
Yes, your trees that are living on Main Street are a real testament to the desire to live because everything is working against them. They don't have enough width and they don't have good access to water, and their soil is completely compacted. So ideally, and they're also getting all that car exhaust thrown at them all the time. And then the stuff the plow truck throws. So it's not good. It's not good if you're a tree on Main Street. But, ideally, if you want to have street trees, you want to have at least 5 feet for them. And it's better if they're in some sort of a planter type trough where they have access to more soil. So the width is one thing, but you have to actually think about the soil volume that they have that goes along with them. And I often say that the trees that are the healthiest are probably the sign that there's a broken water main underneath them. Dripping a bit. Those are the ones that survive. So you can go around and try to find your water leaks by noticing which trees are alive. So that's, if you really want to have street trees, they need some real estate, and so you have to think about that. But there's also some other things. You have planters now, so you could do more with planters. They have a little less of a footprint. You could think about some spaces where planters can also sort of double up as seating, and by providing sort of that over a wall type space that people can sit on. So there are different options to the traditional street tree as well.
Amy also brought up, one of the members on our team that's focused on the stormwater issues, that there's underground systems too that accommodate more root space for the trees. It's like a silva cell, system that can be under the pavement, so it still supports pavement, but also provides much more airspace to the root systems because the roots need just as much air and water space. And so structural soils are, more supported in such a way when you have a system like that that can be placed. And so it may look like just a 5-foot tree grate, but it's actually much larger the way that these are constructed now in urban areas. So.
Okay. So moving along here to some other potential solutions that we looked at. Do you want to take this one, Paul?
Sure. So just some ideas as the new bikeway comes into place along Bridge Street. This is your current open green space down near the river. From what we understand, there is this is a brownfield. So being sensitive to how this gets developed is important because you can't really cut too much into the slope. There's a cap there already right now. So
no digging.
Yeah, no digging. But it can still be developed. And so right now it mounds up and mounds back down. So one of the just sketch ideas that came out of the Charrette that Chris Kennedy was working on was actually providing like a small serpentine retaining wall along the edge there, and then you just fill a little bit to level this off a little bit more. It'll actually increase the grade a little bit and provide an enhanced view. And what we probably do is get in here too and do some selective pruning. It's important to still keep a lot of vegetation along the river because for erosion, those root systems are very important. But what was noticed, especially on a walk and talks, was that you have a lot of invasives there. You have tree of heaven, and you have Norway maples, and you've got some climbing vines of different varieties. There's quite a bit of invasives that should and need to come out. So when your areas do get developed, there's probably a survey that's going to happen. What we would recommend is that they also survey, good trees that are existing that are natives, like gray birch that are in there as well, but also identify where the invasives are located, and then those can come out. So that'll provide opportunities for enhanced views. You can level this off more and keep this as a larger multi-use area that can be used for various kinds of events and just recreation and frisbee and whatnot. The idea to have an open air structure there can just demarcate the end of this and maybe be able to be used for larger events. So in a way, the Harmony Lot was like a smaller event venue space. This is a larger event venue space. If you have a larger band, perhaps, or outdoor movies, where everyone can sit on more of a level lawn area and watch those activities. But just being a big open space is good too, because this is one place in Brattleboro where you have these incredible views of the river as well. So it's just that's something to think about. So that's the thinking with that piece of it there.
And maybe thinking of some play space as well. That's one of the things that we have noticed is lacking amongst the public spaces in Brattleboro, is any sort of place for playing and outdoor recreation. There was a question in the back.
Is there plans for there to be more public restrooms with plumbing in these areas?
So that is certainly a good question and something that the master plan will be looking at. Obviously, park facilities typically come with public facilities like water fountains and toilets, particularly if they're going to be sort of major public facilities. So looking at that, that's clearly something that there is a significant lack of in downtown Brattleboro, are public amenities like toilets.
It's improved.
It has improved with the porta potties, but there's a way to go before it's really
Is this the wall
good
you were
plumbing.
talking? Brandy, is this the wall you were talking about?
Yeah, so this is the museum here. So there's this retaining wall. So if the sidewalk can be moved out, you can actually get around that and get down there. So just some basic things about stuff we were looking at is just thinking about, say, which way the parking is oriented down at Depot. So right now the parking is oriented so that you park towards the building and the drive lane is behind. This switches that around, so you park facing the river and the drive lane is behind. So if this becomes a place where children are playing, they're not playing right next to the moving vehicles. The parked vehicles are a bit of a buffer. So things like that to think about. So Just to point out that this was really the result of about 3 or 4 days of intensive work, and it's not everything. It isn't even everything we came up with in 3 or 4 days. There's unfinished pieces that we are still working on, and lots of other ideas bouncing around. We're going to be looking at public art more. We promised that we would look at the space in front of the library and give that some design ideas, as well as the space in front of the municipal building. And one of the things that we're definitely hearing from people is the interest in the walking, biking corridor in the rail corridor. And we're gonna look at the feasibility of that. That one has quite a bit of technical challenges, but at least laying out and understanding whether it's physically possible, and then what the technical issues would be if you could. At this point, the one thing to point out is that the railroad is the actual owner of that property. Is a multi, it's an international corporation, essentially. It's the Genesee and Wyoming, or Wyoming and Genesee. It's a railroad holding company. So it's no longer really under any level of local ownership, which does not bode particularly well at the moment for trying to get some provision for legitimate walking and use of that corridor. But it's certainly an interesting space. We went down and looked behind Arch Street and looked at the backs of the buildings and spent quite a bit of time down there. And although we didn't present any of these ideas tonight, there was a lot of discussion about what could be done off the back of the buildings. That doesn't require dealing with the railroad, which is a plus. But there are still constraints. So Main Street is free of utility lines because they're behind the buildings. So there's a major utility corridor back there, as well as a rail corridor, and it's pretty significant. So if you get to thinking about plans about moving some of that stuff around, that's very expensive proposals to be thinking about. You've got the positive on the one side that that stuff is not on Main Street anymore, but it is behind the buildings still. So, but we definitely went down and looked down the various alleyways and thought about interesting ways that maybe that space over time, through private efforts really, could become more used and accessible, and offer up the opportunities to see the river better. So whether that's rooftop gardens or more interconnected alleys and sort of deck systems that would connect across, particularly the Hooker-Dunham walk, could provide a lot of interesting space. It would be private space, but could be interesting public gathering places associated with the businesses that are in those buildings as well. So that's where we're going to stop talking so much for tonight and open it up to hopefully more questions and thoughts and such.
Did you decide not to deal with the Harris lot?
Oh, no, it's just that we haven't really dealt with the north part of down Brattleboro at all yet. During our work session, we really focused on the area around the bridge and the intersection, because that is sort of the immediate change piece where there is something happening. So we did focus there, but definitely with the idea of bringing that pathway up through the parking lots and getting up to the north. The Harris parking lot was something that during our walking tour we stopped and looked at. For those of you who haven't gone to view it recently, it has a lovely view of the river and backs up to the recreation center. So once again, it's on that list of possibilities of, does it all need to be parking? Is there some possibility of getting some other public benefits out of this space?
The walking lane, you're not calling it that, the red line, what are you calling it?
I haven't got a good name, so if you could help me market it, that'd be great.
Okay. Who is it designed for?
It would be a mixed-use path, so both for bike and pedestrians. It would be primarily probably for residents, but certainly if you start to think about, as Paul mentioned, the fact that people do travel to go on bike paths. And I know the community, there's larger conversations around interconnecting existing trail systems in the region. And certainly if this becomes a leg of that, it could be a bigger tourism draw and more visitors could use it.
Will you tell me why it's going through parking lots? Because I think that's what threw me, is why a bike lane or a walking lane would be
Well,
centered around that.
there's-
path.
To get away from Main Street.
It gets off of Main Street, and it also points out that
That's where all the public space is.
that is the public space.
Connect them all.
And if you arrive by car and get out, it gives you a way to then move as a pedestrian. So, you know, it's great to have a parking lot, but if you get out of your car and there really isn't, you have to walk through the parking lot to get out to the street, to get to the sidewalk, that's not a particularly great experience. It can be challenging if the, you know, if it's heavily trafficked as well. So there's some logic to bringing a walking, biking path into the parking lot, because you're really bringing the modes of travel together.
There's something very unique too about what's going to happen when the bridge changes over to become this multi-use path and bike lane. You have such a wonderful urban core here with all these activities and amenities, and then you have this more natural environment that the bridge connects to. And so eventually there's this wonderful tourist opportunity that you're going to have too for people that don't live here, that are going to be attracted to come to the bike trail, whatever you want to call it, the red line, that is going to perhaps attract a visitor to stay at a local hotel, be in this urban environment, take the tour out to the nature lands, and then come back and loop back and continue, you know, the end of the tour activities with this urban nature type bike tour that is incredible, because that's going to differentiate you from other bike tour destinations that are incredible. I mean, people come from all over the place, I think, to the bike trail up in Colchester, because it goes over Lake Champlain over to South Hero on this, you know, old rail trail, and it has the bike ferry, but, you know, and it gets you to the apple orchards, you know, so it's a wonderful thing. But I think you have something that's very unique, and you know, so emphasizing that, linking your public spaces, you know, is something to think about with this, and it's just something that's coming together here with the bridge improvement.
So
What is it you think you're linking to on the other side of the bridge?
Oh, well, you already have
Trails.
in New Hampshire.
Yeah, the Wantasket Trail?
And it goes all the way to the Monadnock, actually.
It goes on and on.
And it's somewhat less than inviting right now. So if
Well, it has potential.
it has, I agree it has potential, but all I'm thinking is if that's part of what you're hanging your hook on, you're gonna have to do something in New Hampshire to make that a more desirable place to bike.
You mean Wantasket? More desirable, can you clarify?
Last time I walked there, it was totally strewn with trash.
Wantasket.
Yes, there was washout culverts that they had to walk around, couldn't get across.
But what I'm told is there's miles and miles of bike trails.
It's not just
Incredible
Wantasket. You can, a little bit further south, you can get on the old rail trails.
Okay, I don't know about further south, I'm just talking about the place right behind. It's great views of town, I mean, there's a connection there. Great, you go up and you get some nice views, but all I'm thinking is if this is connected, I think there's going to have to be some cooperative work done with the folks on the other side of the river.
Well, to make the bridge come to reality, I think there will have to be cooperation, because technically it's New Hampshire.
There is.
Yeah, we did have questions in the back.
Hi. So I was wondering about the, you have this wonderful walking, biking trail that goes like a block away from Main Street, but then also a plan for Main Street to be more walkable and bikeable.
Yes.
I was just wondering if both are necessary, or if downtown is maybe more resistant to change, but there are definitely areas around that biking and walking trail, Elliot Street, the Flat Street lot, that I think there's more excitement, inspiration, and want for change.
I think the answer to that goes back to the discussion around the different types of bicyclists. There are some people in the community that want bicycle access on Main Street because they want the bicycle to be their primary mode of travel, and so they want to be able to access their businesses and services on Main Street just as someone in a car would, but from their bicycle. And that's, one of that's their primary interest. Whereas, for others, it's more either a recreational activity or, they want to get from one destination to another, but aren't necessarily thinking of using that in place of vehicle transportation for daily activities as much. And in that case, the path off of Main Street would probably be far more desirable for those type of bicyclists. That is a question to weigh. I think it's...
follow-up on that comment is I used to live up on the northwest side of Main Street in the Oak Street neighborhood. And the first summer I moved back, I volunteered at the museum. And that's the exact path I would walk to come from that side of town.
I think a lot of people actually do that.
Because of the safety of that path. It felt safer than Main Street, both walking and biking.
I do think a lot of people do that as a cut through and around to get from one end of downtown to another. And I think the other piece to think about on the path, as we showed, there's really not a way to get a incredibly great bike facility on Main Street, because you're still going to have the traffic, and there really isn't, as much width. There's going to be pinch points. There's going to be places where the bikes are going to need to converge with the traffic to some degree as we go along. So you can show the cross section as the ideal condition along most of it, but there's going to be points, the intersections you have to contend with. So going, if you're thinking about how you could best serve most bicyclists, it's probably the pathway system that's off Main Street, but there's a segment of people who want, like I said, who really want to choose biking as their primary transportation mode. And for them, being able to use Main Street's important.
I was just going to say, I think even if bike lanes didn't appear on Main Street, looking at a wider sidewalk and allocated, that has benefits to the businesses and the public. So just even looking at that right away is important.
One more.
Yeah, I just really want to heartily second that. As far as I'm concerned, losing the parking in the way that you're describing in order to gain more spaces downtown that are nice to stand and walk or sit or do other things is going to be better for businesses than the current situation where maybe I have an ultra convenient parking spot right in front of my business. This kind of scenario, like in general, what you're proposing on many different levels, that may require pushing people out a little farther to park in what's currently unused capacity, but then once they park and walk a few steps, there are nicer places to be than there are currently on sidewalks with maybe outdoor seating or outdoor kiosks and stuff like that. I think that's going to be so much better and so much more pleasant to exist on Main Street and better for business than having the parking spot there and no place comfortable to be other than in my car or inside the store. That's my opinion.
I feel like I need to amend my statement because you guys weren't in my head. I am the biggest proponent of this. I was already listening to the naysayers and how would I defend it. That was not me saying I need studies. It was there must be studies that show this is an amazing idea because I know it is. So.
And then we had one in the back.
I just remember the planning commission meeting when we talked about that pathway, and we were all really excited that we could take the property that the town already has and link them together in this way. First of all, because it's so hard to establish a new pathway where you don't own the property. But second of all, it was just such a nice alternative that you could look at the mountain and so forth, and we already have it, we can just piece it together?
I will say that, you know, we did, in going through, the views from High Grove parking lot, for instance, are very, very nice. And we had some creative conversation around what you could do with the back of the post office building, including paint the hillside on it. I don't know what you do. I don't know if you have to go out and redo this every season or not. But you can, if you stand there and stare at it, you can see how you can make the building disappear by painting the hillside along the back of it. In the back. I thought you had something. No? Okay.
So in the plans, there's biking accommodation, there's landscaping, you talked a little bit about rainwater and water management, and then talked a little bit about seating in 2 performance spaces. But I'm wondering, like, did any creative placemaking ideas come up during this planning, or the pop-ups that really resonated, or that seemed like they would not only create a space but activate or engage people with the space?
I think, yes, definitely. For instance, that was part of the conversation around those parking spaces in front of the entrance to the co-op. Was thinking about using those as something a bit more like a pop-up parklet type space that could be adaptable over time and change maybe seasonally and things like that. And then also, there's been a lot, we didn't go into this tonight, but a lot of discussion about how to program the spaces. We're seeing a lot of comments about that in the survey as well, so that there are activities and things happening in them, and that they have some differentiation about kind of what the purpose of the spaces are and how they're used, so that they each have an identity and a function in the system. So I think there's that piece. And then even in the way of some of the bike head pieces and the stormwater pieces, we are definitely looking at ways to do that that are sort of take off from the pop-up stage and are simple, quick, fairly inexpensive changes to the existing infrastructure, in recognition that, you know, waiting for a major project to happen, you don't want that. You don't want to just be sitting waiting for that to put it together and find the funding. You want to be able to do some small steps. So I think that what you'll see when we get around to coming back with the draft report is you will see a mix of implementation, sort of the bigger ideas, which are some of the things we talked about here tonight, and then smaller steps and things that are either more temporary or sort of inching their way towards being components of a bigger set of changes.
And one of the smaller spaces that we did talk about on a walk and talk tour that could be permanent too is the space right in front of the library. The concrete pavement, as Brandy mentioned, is kind of, there's different pitches coming from the building and whatnot, and you know, there's that elevated walk and then it meets flush, but then to meet the walk flush from the building, there's quite a pitch. But if you think about it, you have enough room between the sidewalk edge all the way to the building that you could have a sidewalk at the same pitch that it is today, and you could create an elevated patio that's at the same first floor elevation of the library, because you've got a storefront library basically right there. And you could have outdoor seating, you know, in a way, a library cafe perhaps or something. You know, so those are the things that did come up on the walk and talk tours that were pretty interesting. So.
Can I make a plug? If you're not a town meeting member, or you are interested in this but you haven't thought about joining the Planning Commission or the Conservation Commission, you know, those are all things that you can do to stay engaged in this conversation past today and like be part of the decision-making body that actually gets to decide about this stuff. And you know, you can always pass to select board people as well, or come along to those meetings. So just a point.
So since that was sort of a kind of wrap-up comment, I'm going to play with that and go forward to say what our next steps are going to be. We're going to be working on sort of finishing out that to-do list of ideas that got generated during the last week that we haven't had enough time yet to really delve into. And we're going to be putting together a draft plan. and coming back to the planning commission and working through that. And we expect sometime in the early part of next year, so probably maybe the February timeframe, to have a draft that we're going to bring out to people and present and take more comments on and then refine from there. But the goal is to have the plan done and a bow on it by spring.
So would that then fit into the master plan that you referred to?
That is the master plan.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
It'll be dry.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks to the museum for having us and thanks for coming out.
Oh, planning has a Facebook page now. Find us on Facebook. We'll be posting a lot of stuff. You can comment.